Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Ooh. As the sounds of the late, great Jimi Hendrix pour through my veins, ladies and gentlemen, you are dialed into the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. This is the Crunch Time Express. The Voodoo Child is in the chair, and we got 6 really impactful games to break down this weekend. So let's jump right in. And before we do, let's take a look back at what we were able to do last week. Coming off of a less than stellar performance the week prior, we absolutely bounced back, going 9-4 last week, up almost 4 units last week. That puts us at the season total 58, 31, and 1. That's a 65% hit percentage right now. There's not a handicapper in this business that would not take a 65% hit percentage, up over 20 units on the season. So we are getting it done each and every week. And folks, the best is yet to come. Now, let's get on to this week. In our first matchup, we have the SMU Mustangs traveling to the Bluegrass State to take on Louisville in this very important matchup here. So let's start with the SMU offense. And really, ladies and gentlemen, I have to be honest with you. This offense has had me puzzled early on this season. When I look at them on the surface, I see an offense that averages 30 points per game. I'm sorry, 38 points per game. I see an offense that's averaging well north of 375 yards per game in total offense. I see a passing offense that is throwing the ball for a little over 200 yards per game. And I see a rushing attack that's averaging over 170 yards per game. I see an offense that is averaging 5.4 yards per play. But when I look a little bit deeper into the numbers, I see a passing attack that is only averaging 6.8 yards per play. I see a rushing attack that is only averaging 4.4 yards per rush attempt. I see an offense that is really only scoring 3.3 touchdowns per game. I see an offense that is only converting 42% on third down. So why is this offense got me so puzzled? Well, here's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at an offense that is only averaging 28.3% of their drives ending with a touchdown. I would expect that number to be a lot higher given how many points per game that they're averaging. So there's a disconnect somewhere. And after this week, I think I should be able to find where that disconnect truly is. They will be facing a Louisville Cardinal defense that is only allowing 21.3 points per game. A defense that is only giving up 327 yards of total offense, 207 yards passing allowed, 120 yards rushing allowed. Now, this Louisville defense is giving up 5.4 yards per play. 7.2 yards per pass attempt is what this defense is allowing. Well, folks, this rush defense is pretty darn good. They're only allowing their opponents 3.7 yards per rushing attempt. They're doing a fantastic job of keeping their opponents out of the end zone. About 24% of their opponents' drives in a touchdown. That's phenomenal. And then when I look at it, only about 29% of their drives are ending in the score. So for SMU's offense, the big key will be, can this rushing attack led by Branchard Smith, 5'10", 200-pound senior out of Richmond Heights, Florida, can he get the run game going? And what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is he's gone over 125 yards in his last two games against TCU a couple of weeks ago, and then just last week against Florida State. Average 7 point, well, let's split the difference. 7.3 yards per rush attempt. That is absolutely getting it done, and 4 touchdowns in his last 2 contests. He's going to need to have that kind of performance this week against one of the most stingiest run defenses. I like where our metrics are in this ball game as far as SMU's rushing offense. Our model has the production for SMU in this contest. We're expecting them to hit 130 yards rushing in this ball game. Now, let's flip it over. The Louisville offense, must-see TV right now. The Cardinal offense averaging 35 points per game, 444 yards of total offense, 298 passing, 145 rushing, 6.9 yards per play, 9.1 yards per pass attempt. I can get behind that number. Almost 15 yards per pass completion. I can absolutely get behind that number. 4.6 yards per rushing attempt. That's respectable. This team is averaging 4 touchdowns per game. The third down conversion, 46.2%. And their drives ending with a touchdown is right about 39%. That is top 25 in the nation. They will be facing an SMU defense that's allowing 25 points per game, 350 yards of total offense, 242 through the air, 108 on the ground. This Mustang defense is allowing their opponents to gain 5.1 yards per play, 6.9 yards per passing attempt. Here's the scary bugaboo here. SMU's defense allowing 13.3 yards per completion. That's one of the worst in Division I football. They are absolutely stingy against the run, only allowing their opponents 3.3 yards per rushing attempt. Now, we know Florida State is allergic to being able to run the ball, so that number might have a little bit of fluff in there. Their SMU's defense is only allowing their opponents to convert about 35% of the time, and 1 out of every 4 drives by their opponents are ending in a touchdown. So what's the key for this Louisville Cardinal offense? It's got to be senior quarterback Tyler Shute. And this transfer quarterback in his first year with Louisville out of Chandler, Arizona, needs to have a big-time performance. What have we seen from him on the season so far? 76 completions, 177 passing attempts, 1,114 yards. Folks, this is the touchdown to interception ratio that we love at the NFL level and certainly at the college level. 11 passing touchdowns, 1 INT. That is winning football. And they let a game that I thought if they didn't turn the ball over as much against Notre Dame, I really felt that this team had a great chance of going to South Bend and getting that win. Lost that game by 7, but Tyler in that contest, 24 for 41, 264 yards against a really, really good Notre Dame defense. About 59% completion, 6.4 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 INT. I expect a big-time performance in this matchup for Louisville, and our motto, absolutely love the Cardinal in this matchup. We expect Louisville to go over the 300-yard passing mark in this contest. So that's the breakdown for our first game. Let's get on to our next contest, and that is the Iowa Hawkeyes making their way to Columbus, Ohio to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. I want to say a quick hello to my good friend Amber Holly. Amber is one of my dearest friends in this entire industry and absolutely love her. Lindsay, all the rest of our Ohio State listeners, we finally have a game early on in this season worth talking about with your Buckeyes. So the scheduling should have been a little bit better, but we're here now. So let's break down this matchup. The Iowa Hawkeyes, let's take a look at who they are on offense. Because this year, it's a little bit different than what we've seen and certainly in years past. This Iowa offense is averaging 29 points per game, 366 yards of total offense. Now, the passing offense still pretty pedestrian, 106 through the air, but 260 yards on the ground. This Iowa Hawkeyes offense is averaging 5.5 yards per play, 4.2 yards per pass attempt. We know that's not going to get it done against this Ohio State defense, but 6.3 yards per rushing attempt. Folks, can you pick up what I'm putting down here? 3.3 touchdowns per game is what this offense is averaging. Now, that is much improved over last year. This team is converting on third downs at a clip of about 44%. About 28% of their drives are ending in a touchdown. Now, let's flip it over and talk about this Buckeye defense. And folks, under defensive coordinator Jim knows it's going to be exactly what I thought they were going to be. This man knows how to coach defense. We're going to see two of the best defensive coordinators in college football in this matchup. Phil Parker on the other side for Iowa. We'll talk about his stop unit here in just a moment. Buckeye defense is allowing less than 7 points per game. 197 yards of total offense. 119 through the air, 78 on the ground. 3.4 yards per play. Folks, you get where I'm going with these metrics. Whether you've played Nashville Diesel College or Western Kentucky, putting up those numbers are pretty impressive. Let's take a look at if this Iowa Hawkeye offense is going to be successful. I think that they're absolutely going to have to test this Ohio State rushing defense. And when we look at the Ohio State rushing defense power rankings, they come in as the 18th best rushing defense. So that's something. No, that's still extremely good, but it doesn't mean that they can't be run on. And we look at the player to watch in this contest for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm going to go back to this name once again, and that's Caleb Johnson, 6 foot, 225-pound dot back from Hamilton, Ohio. On the season, 82 carries, 685 yards, 8.4 yards per rushing attempt, and 9 touchdowns. In this young man's first 4 games in this season, he has not had less than 100 yards in any contest. He's found the end zone at least twice in every game so far this season. If Iowa is going to keep this within that 3 touchdown number, they're going to need a big time game out of Caleb Johnson. I think he could absolutely have a big game against this Ohio State rush defense, because I don't think that this unit has truly been tested so far this season. And we're going to find out a lot about Ohio State, both on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. Speaking of that Ohio State offense, let's get into it. We know the non-conference for Ohio State has been extremely weak. Using our power rankings for Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall, we're not even including the FCS team that they played. The average ranking of those 3 teams in our power rankings is 99. So we know that Ohio State hasn't been tested. Looking at their opening conference game against Michigan State last weekend, winning that game 38-7, cruised in the fourth quarter. No issues with that. You want to get out of that game healthy. So Ohio State is our 9th overall power rank team, 4th on offense, 2nd on defense, but 49th on special teams. Keep that in mind as this game starts to roll on. Now, Ohio State's offense, especially in the passing game, has been able to take advantage of some overmatched opponents. This will be a significant test for the Buckeyes in this contest. So let's take a look at Ohio State. And I'm just going to highlight just a couple of numbers, because I think we're going to see just a little bit of regression just because of the respect that I have for Phil Parker and that Iowa defense. Ohio State is basically top 10, well, let's call it top 15 in basically all of the offensive metrics. Points, yards, passing yards, rushing yards, yards per, you get where I'm going with it. They're going up against the defense that actually has a pulse. And when we look at this Iowa defense is only allowing 18.3 points per game, 300 yards of total offense, 227 through the air, 74 yards on the ground, 5.3 yards per play, 6.5 yards per passing attempt, 3.5 yards per rushing attempt. Their opponents are only converting 30% on third down. And when we look at the Ohio State passing offense, and we know that it's going to be ranked extremely high, the 7th best power rank passing offense in our numbers. Rushing offense, 34th power rank rushing attack. They're going up against the stop unit that is giving up some passing yards. This Iowa Hawkeye passing defense power rankings is 82nd. And that's kind of to be expected when you lose an early round pick in Cooper DeJean out of that secondary, who's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. So unlike an Ohio State, unlike a Georgia, an Alabama, and one of these big-time powerhouses programs, when you lose a first round or early second round pick off of one of those defenses, it's going to show up. I think if Ohio State is not only to win this game, but to get margin, it's going to be on the arm of quarterback Will Howard and his decision-making. Howard on the season, 72 for 105, 1,039 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 INTs. I'm going to briefly just look at his numbers in that game against Michigan State, because that's probably the best comp game to really evaluate his performance. He was 21 for 31 completed about 68%, 244 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT. What I want to see from Will Howard in this contest is the maturity that a senior quarterback should have in a big-time game like this. It's okay to punt. It is not okay to risk take and turn the ball over. You have a really good defense, Will Howard. It's imperative that you do not put them into a short field by turning the ball over. If need be, take a sack, throw the ball away, but do not force the ball into coverage unless the game situation dictates it. If you're trailing by 10 points late in the fourth quarter, hey, you got to do what you got to do. You got to throw it. But early on in this contest, you need to take care of the ball. It's okay to punt in this ball game, Ohio State. Just make sure that you take care of business, and we'll see what kind of results come out of this ball game. In our next contest, the Miami Hurricanes escaping last week against a gritty and gutty Virginia Tech team. And this is where I'm going to give Miami and head coach Mario Cristobal some credit. That is a game that they would have absolutely lost last year. So they won it. Controversial call. I'm not going with that. When I saw it live, I didn't think that the wide receiver for Virginia Tech made the catch inbounds. And then looking at the replay, he was certainly out of bounds. So it was the right call. I hate it took as long as it did on the delay, but the important thing is they got the call right. Now, let's get into this Miami matchup with the Cal Golden Bears. Miami comes in with a 5-0 record. Cal comes in 3-1. The Hurricanes' offense is extremely explosive. And when I look at every single metric, the data is absolutely telling me that, with the exception of their rushing offense. You're talking about an offense that's averaging almost 48 points per game, 595 yards of total offense per game. That's best in the country. 405 yards per game passing, 190 yards rushing. That is still phenomenal. 8.7 yards per play, 10.7 yards per passing attempt. Cam Ward is big game hunting, and he's making the most of it when he's big game hunting. 15.6 yards per pass completion. That's Jalen Daniels' numbers from last year. I mean, that's explosive. 6.3 yards per rushing attempt. Oh, yeah. 6.3 total touchdowns per game. Phenomenal. This Miami offense is converting third downs at a historic rate. 63% conversions on third down. That is absolutely phenomenal. Miami has actually dialed back the penalties a little bit so far. 6.8 penalties per game. You can live with that as long as it's not those crazy personal foul penalties. Let's look at this Cal stop unit. Cal Golden Bears. This defense has been extremely good early on in the season, only allowing 12.7 points per play. Points per game. I do apologize. I'm looking at my notes here. Okay, 12.7 points per game. 282 yards of total offense. 154 passing, 128 rushing. This Cal defense is only allowing 4.7 yards per play, 5 yards per passing attempt, and 3.9 yards per rushing attempt. That is absolutely phenomenal. I think the key for this Miami offense in this ball game is Cam Ward getting back on track after that subpar performance last weekend against Virginia Tech. I think he's going to be dialed back in. On the season so far, Cam Ward, 113 completions, 161 attempts, 1,782 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 4 INTs. And our model is expecting a big time performance out of this passing game against this Cal defense. We have the Canes going over 325 yards passing in this ball game there in Berkeley. So let's take a look at the Cal offense, because they are going to play a very pivotal part into this matchup. So Cal, we're looking at an offense that's averaging only 20.3 points per game, 405 yards of total offense, 220 through the air, 185 on the ground. We're looking at a unit that is averaging 5.7 yards per play, 5.6 yards per passing attempt, but 5.7 yards per rushing attempt. Cal's offense is converting third downs at about 45%. Struggling to put touchdowns on the board is something that should be of a concern in this matchup. They're only averaging 2.3 total touchdowns per game. And looking at their drives ending with a touchdown, it's 19th percent. That is 100th in our metrics out of 134 teams. So, who's got to come up big in this ball game? For the Cal Golden Bears, it has to be running back Javion Thomas, a sophomore, 5'10", 190 pounds, out of Oakland, California. And on the season, 38 carries, 267 yards, 7 yards per rushing attempt, 1 touchdown. He is going to need a big game coming off of a bad performance last weekend against Florida State. Only 7 carries, only 26 yards, 3.7 yards per rushing attempt. He also struggled against Auburn a few weeks back. Only had 8 carries in that ball game, 53 yards. Did go for 6.6 yards per rushing attempt and 1 touchdown. Did have a long run of 32 yards to help that average out quite a bit. If the Cal Golden Bears cannot sustain a rushing attack in this ball game, going to be difficult for them to keep this game within margin. And our metrics are showing the Cal Golden Bears to only hit 125 yards rushing in this contest. That may not be enough to stay within margin against this Miami Hurricanes team. Our next matchup, we will head back out to the desert. Once again, where we find the UNLV Running Rebels welcoming in the Syracuse Orangemen. The Orangemen come into this contest with a 3-1 record. UNLV sitting there with a perfect 4-0 mark. And here's a game where we have to look at 3 of the 4 units. We have consistent data. There is one outlier with the UNLV offense that we'll mention here in just a moment. Let's take a look at that Syracuse Orangemen offense under first-year head coach Fran Brown. This is a very pass-heavy offense. 65% of their plays are passing attempts, while only 35% are rushing attempts. Something to keep in mind in this contest. So it makes sense when I give out the following numbers. Syracuse offense is averaging 31 points per game, 453 yards of total offense, 348 through the air. That's the 4th best in the country, folks. But, and this is a big but, 105 yards per game rushing. That's 113th. 6.6 yards per play. Every explosive play that this team is getting, it's coming through the passing game. 7.8 yards per pass attempt. 4.3 yards per rushing attempt. The Orangemen come in averaging 4 touchdowns per game, converting on third downs 53.3%. That's sixth best in the country. 41% of their drives ending with a touchdown. That's how you average 4 touchdowns per game. Excellent job there. And Fran Brown, defensive-minded coach. Discipline is definitely there and only averaging 6 penalties per game. Let's take a look at this UNLV defense that they're going to be going up against. The Rebel defense allowing only 13.7 points per game, 305 yards of total offense, 208 through the air, 107 on the ground. Do not expect Syracuse to have a whole lot of success running the ball against this running Rebel defense. UNLV is allowing 4.7 yards per play, 5.3 yards per passing attempt, and 4 yards per rushing attempt. The Orangemen come into this game with the 5th best passing power ranking offense in our metric, led by former Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord. McCord on the season, 114 completions, 177 attempts, 1,459 yards, 14 touchdowns, 5 INTs. We expect Kyle McCord to put the ball in the air early and often. And UNLV comes into this game with a 97th power-rated passing defense. So expect Syracuse to have some success in this ball game throwing the ball. And our metrics bear that out. We're expecting Kyle McCord to go over 300 yards passing against this UNLV defense. If Syracuse can avoid the costly turnover in this game should definitely be close going into the fourth quarter. So, Syracuse, you know what your responsibilities are. Now, UNLV, we know that there's a new starting quarterback. So, we're not going to give you all of their numbers on the season, but we are going to highlight some things that we saw last weekend against Fresno State. So let's talk about this UNLV offense as a whole, and then where we think we're going to have to make some adjustments. This UNLV offense is averaging 36 points per game, 342 yards of total offense, 127 through the air, 214 on the ground. Now, that ground game is going to be there. 5.6 yards per play, 7.3 yards per passing attempt. We'll get back to that in a moment, but 4.9 yards per rushing attempt. This offense is averaging 3.3 touchdowns per game. Third down conversion, it has been a struggle all year long. Only converting on third downs 28% of the time. That's one of the worst units in college football in our metric. Now, let's take a look back last week with this new quarterback for UNLV and what offensive numbers stood out for us. Well, right off the bat, 2 for 8 on third down. That's not going to get it done. Now, 450 yards of total offense. Okay, you get my attention with that. 198 through the air, so it wasn't like there was a big jump now. 14 for 17 and average 11.6 yards per attempt. We like that. What I said was not going to change was the UNLV rushing attack. 39 carries, 252 yards, 6.5 yards per rushing attempt. So let's stay right there. Let's just highlight this right here, because I think this is going to be where, if UNLV is going to win this game, this is where it's going to come down to. Can this UNLV rushing attack that comes into our power rankings as the 14th best rushing offense in college football, can they find success against a unit for Syracuse that is the 96th power ranked rushing defense? Our metrics absolutely love UNLV rushing attack in this offense. I mean, in this ball game, I should say. We have UNLV to go over 240 yards rushing in this ball game, and we're going to highlight the new quarterback, Hajab Malik Williams, last weekend against Fresno State. 13 for 16, 182 yards, 11.4 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no INTs. But on the ground, 12 carries, 119 yards, 9.9 yards per rushing attempt. Folks, that's almost a first down every time he touched the ball as far as running it. Had a long of 24 yards and did have another touchdown. So 4 total touchdowns in that ball game. I expect another big-time game out of this quarterback. If UNLV is going to win this contest, it will be because of the rushing attack, chewing up that clock, putting points on the board. And while Syracuse loves to throw the ball, it's one thing to love to throw the ball. It's another to have to throw to catch up. That's when quarterbacks have to take a few more risks, and that's when you see turnovers. And I think that's where this game is going to be won. Which strength wins out in this contest? Is it the Syracuse passing attack against UNLV's passing defense, or is it that rushing ground attack for UNLV going up against this really poor rushing defense for the Syracuse Orangemen? So my good friend Pigskin Petey that's watching this or listening to the podcast, your Orangemen are going to be in an absolute dogfight there in Allegiant Stadium coming up this weekend. And now, folks, in our first game of the week, and it is our good friends Matlock and his wonderful co-host Julie Vols as they host a fantastic show there on the beautiful Emerald Coast called Matlock and Loaded. You can catch them Monday through Fridays, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central Time each week. You can also stream the show at wearesports.com. I have the pleasure of joining Matlock and Julie every Wednesday and Friday at the top of the 10 o'clock hour for 2 segments. So I really appreciate them having me on the show each and every week. And this is our Matlock and Julie Balls to the Wall game of the week. And they selected an SEC matchup with the Missouri Tigers traveling down to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. This is a big-time matchup in the Southeastern Conference. And for both teams, still having a shot of getting to Atlanta to play in the SEC championship game and still have playoff aspirations. Missouri comes in to this ball game 4-0. Texas A&M winning their last 4 games after dropping that opener to Notre Dame at home. And I got to be honest with you, I'm a little fascinated about this contest between Missouri and Texas A&M. Let's take a look at that Missouri offense. The Tiger offense coming to this ball game, averaging 32 points per game, 467 yards of total offense. Balance attack here, 244 through the air, 222 on the ground, 6.0 yards per play, 6.5 yards per passing attempt. Not finding those deep shots down the field just yet. 5.6 yards per rushing attempt. Oh, we like that. 3.3 total touchdowns per game. This team is converting on third downs absolutely beautifully. 53% is what they're converting on third downs. Let's call it 29% of their drives ending with a touchdown, and over half of their total drives either end with a touchdown or a field goal. That is how you average over 30 points per game. And we're only seeing 7 penalties per game from this unit led by Coach Eli Drinkowitz. Let's take a look at that Texas A&M defense because, folks, I thought the wrecking crew might be back this year. I am loving what I'm seeing from this Texas A&M defense in a lot of categories. Now, let's start with the points per game. This defense is only allowing 20 points per game, 344 yards of total offense, 225 through the air, 119 on the ground, 5.5 yards per play, 6.3 yards per passing attempt, 4.5 yards per rushing attempt. The Aggies' opponents are only finding the end zone 2.3 times per game. Certainly not converting on third downs, as Texas A&M is only allowing their opponents to convert at a 25% clip. That's top 10 in the country. Their opponents scoring drives, 20% of their drives ending with a touchdown. So let's take a look at the power rankings because I think that's gonna shed a little bit more light on this ball game. Missouri comes in with the 7th best rushing power rankings in our metrics, and they're going up against an Aggie defense that is the 24th best rushing defense. So you're talking about good on good in that aspect. I'm going to highlight not the quarterback, not that phenomenal wide receiver there in Luther Burden, but I'm going to look at Nate Noel, 5'10", 190-pound senior out of Miami, Florida, on the season, 69 carries, 441 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 6.4 yards per rushing attempt. Folks, in his last 2 games, you're looking at a running back that has carried the ball against Vandy and Boston College 46 times combined for 320 yards. Folks, he's averaging a $160 there. Well over 6.5 yards per rushing attempt. I absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. And he's going to need a big-time rushing performance in this contest because that Texas A&M defense is absolutely stout. If you stay consistent with the run, Missouri, that's going to open up those talented wide receivers that you have. And, of course, Luther Burden and Theo Wise Jr. You want to make Texas A&M have to bring that safety down into the box, commit that 8th man into the box, and then take your shots with those 2 talented wide receivers that you have. Let's take a look at this Texas A&M offense versus this Missouri defense. And we've seen just a little bit of a change with the quarterback change that they made due to injury. And that is Marcel Reed, who last week did a really solid job of taking care of the ball in that game against Texas A&M. So we're going to focus on some of their metrics, and then, like I said, we're just going to have to adjust manually here. So right now, Aggie offense averaging 23.3 points per game, 360 yards of total offense, 147 through the air, 213 on the ground, 5.3 yards per play, 5.7 yards per passing attempt, 5 yards per rush. Aggies struggle on third down though. They're only converting 35% there, averaging only 2.3 touchdowns per game. They're going up against a Missouri stop unit that is absolutely playing phenomenal. 16 points per game allowed, 264 total offense, 151 passing, 113 rushing, 4.8 yards per play, 5.9 yards per passing attempt, and only 3.9 yards per rushing attempt. This Missouri defense is lights out as far as their opponents converting on third down. less than 24% adjusted there. So good on good here. So if Texas A&M is going to win this game, they're going to have to lean on their rushing attack because their passing game bit inconsistent. And like I said, let's take a look back at that game last weekend against Arkansas when they won 21-17. Texas A&M 11 for 22, so 50% there. Only 163 yards passing, 7.4 yards per passing attempt. So how did A&M win that game? Well, it wasn't even on the strength of their running attack. 38 carries, 134 yards, 3.5 yards per rushing attempt. What won them the ball game is they forced 3 Arkansas Razorback turnovers, and they had none. You're +3 in the turnover margin. You should win 99.9% of your games there. So, Missouri, if you take care of the ball in this contest, you have an excellent chance of coming out of College Station with a win. And let's take a look at those rushing stats here and where are we projecting this ball game to be at. We're calling for Missouri to have, and I have it here. Yes. Okay. We're expecting both teams to have quite a good deal of success running the ball. We expect Missouri to go over 200 yards rushing in this ball game. We expect A&M to go over 170 yards rushing per game. So whoever takes care of the ball best in this contest should come out of this ball game with a big win there in conference play. And folks, that leaves us to one final game to break down, and that is our Crunch Time Sports Advantage game of the week. And that's where we find the Rutgers Scarlet Knights traveling to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Rutgers comes into this contest oh, pardon me there. Lost my place in my notes there. So Rutgers comes into this contest with a perfect 4-0 record. Nebraska comes into this ball game with a 4-1 record. This game kicks off 3:00 Central Time. And what has me fascinated by this game and what really is going to lead me into this breakdown is going to be this. Let's see which coach understands what needs to happen to win this contest. And we're going to talk about all 3 phases of the game here. So, for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, Rutgers comes into this game averaging 32 points per game, 412 yards of total offense, 198 yards passing, but a fantastic 214 yards rushing per game. This offense is averaging 6.1 yards per play, 7.8 yards per passing attempt, and 5.1 yards per rushing attempt. This team is converting third downs at a very, very high rate. 51% is what they're converting on third downs. A tick below 40% of all of their offensive drives are ending with a touchdown. That's top 20 in the nation. This team is averaging 4.3 touchdowns per game and only committing 4.3 penalties per game. They will be facing a Nebraska defense that is trying to remind people in Lincoln of the black shirts back in the early 90s. This Nebraska defense is only allowing 14.5 points per game, 268 yards of total offense, 178 through the air, 90 yards on the ground. This Nebraska defense is only allowing 4.6 yards per play, 5.4 yards per passing attempt, and only 3.5 yards per rushing attempt. This is truly good on good. And in this particular matchup, when I look at our advanced metrics, the Rutgers offense comes in as the 12th best offense in college football. And when I look a little bit deeper how that's broken out, they come in with the 42nd rated passing offense and the 25th best rushing offense. They are going up against the Nebraska stop unit that comes in as our 55th power rated defense, 43rd passing, 37th rushing. Can Nebraska slow down? I don't even want to say shut down. Slow down this talented rushing attack. Cal Montague, 97 carries, 587 yards, 6 touchdowns. And folks, he's not just getting that done against mediocre opponents. In his last 2 contests, a tough game against Virginia Tech, 26 carries but 84 yards in that contest. And then came back last weekend and just absolutely continued to be that sledgehammer. 25 carries, 132 yards, 5.3 yards per attempt. As long as Rutgers stay connected in this ball game, they're not going to shy away from running the ball. So, Nebraska, you know what your assignment is. Your assignment is to shut down or at least slow down this rushing attack. And our model is expecting Rutgers to have some success running the ball. Our model is calling for Rutgers to go over 150 yards in this contest, which will open up the Rutgers passing attack. They need to take some deep shots down the field to get that safety out of the box and open up some lanes for that talented running back. Now, let's take a look at the Cornhuskers in this matchup. And Nebraska comes in averaging 30 points per game, 401 yards of total offense, 247 passing, 154 rushing. This offense is averaging 5.8 yards per play. 7.3 yards per passing attempt, but only 4.4 yards per rushing attempt. So this is an offense, while their balance as far as their play calling, it's not balanced as far as in the execution and the efficiency. So that's something to bear in mind there. Nebraska is averaging on third down 44% conversion rate there. Their drives ending with a touchdown, 35% of their drives end with a touchdown. That's really good. Here's an issue that we're seeing with this team early on in the season, and that is committing way too many penalties. 9 penalties per game. That's one of the worst in college football, along with the almost 81 yards in penalty yards. So Matt Rule, disciplinary head coach, that's got to get cleaned up. They are going up against a Rutgers defense that is allowing 19 points per game, 383 yards of total offense, 196 passing, 187 rushing. Rutgers is allowing 6.4 yards per play. That is not good. 5.8 yards per passing attempt. Now, that is excellent, but here's the issue for Rutgers. They are allowing 7.2 yards per rushing attempt. Second worst in all of college football there in that metric. Their opponents are averaging 37% on third down conversions, but only 23% of their opponents' drives are ending in a touchdown. This is where I need to find out if Matt Rule understands the opponent that he's playing and what needs to be done. When we look at this Nebraska rushing offense, they're power ranked 91st in the nation. They're going up against a Rutgers defense that you should have some success on because Rutgers is the 97th power rated rushing defense in college football. Nebraska, you got to find some success running the ball because I think you're going to struggle throwing the ball against this Rutgers defense. This Rutgers defense, pass defense, 23rd in our power rankings, while this Nebraska passing attack is 39th. I think the key in this ball game is going to come down to the next unit that I'm going to talk about. And folks, that is the special teams in this ball game. The X factor, as I like to call it, will be the special teams because both teams are absolutely dreadful in special teams. You're talking about a Rutgers special teams that is power rated 127. You're talking about a Nebraska team that is power ranked 128. We're looking at just special team weaknesses all over the place with these two teams. And let's see here. Okay. So who has the advantage in the special teams? Let's take a look and break down each part of the special teams. We're going to give a slight edge to Nebraska in the field goal kicking department as their kicker is just hitting at a little bit better percentage. We're going to give a slight edge, and I do mean a slight edge to Rutgers in the punting as they're averaging just about a yard more per punt than Nebraska. So not a big difference, but it's something that could come into play. Both teams are averaging about 23 yards per kickoff return, but here's where Nebraska has a big advantage, and that is the punt return game. As Nebraska is averaging over 13 yards per punt return, while Rutgers is only averaging 5 yards per punt return. I think that this game could absolutely swing on which special team in all four of those phases, which make up the special teams, whichever one of those units perform the best overall, that's who I expect to win this ball game. Let's take a look at some other key games around college football this weekend. Oregon getting ready for that big showdown against Ohio State next weekend, welcoming in conference opponent Michigan State. Speaking of the state of Michigan, Michigan travels across country to take on conference opponent, the Washington Huskies. The Tennessee Volunteers, Julie Vols, they are back in action this weekend coming off a bye. They head down to Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. In a game that, while it may not be important, it is damn sure significant. The Alabama Crimson Tide travel up to my backyard to take on the Vanderbilt Commodores. I want to see how this team responds after that emotional win against the Georgia Bulldogs last week. Will they be completely focused, or will they be still kind of riding the high of that ball game? We're going to learn a little bit more about Kalen DeBoer as a head coach in this contest. Up next, the Pitt Panthers travel down to Chapel Hill to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. That Tar Heel team is absolutely reeling and could be right for the picking there for the Pitt Panthers. Speaking of a team that needs a bounce back, Lane Kiffin and his Ole Miss Rebels travel to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. You have 3 of the 4 service academies in action as the Navy midshipmen traveled to Colorado Springs to take on the Air Force Falcons. And finally, the Army Black Knights will travel to Tulsa to take on the Golden Hurricanes. And who needs to show me something this week? It absolutely is the Georgia Bulldogs. You came out flat against Kentucky 3 weeks ago. You had the bye week. That first half against the University of Alabama may be the worst 30 minutes of football that I've seen since Kirby Smart has been the head coach there at his alma mater. You have a team that is basically on its last legs this weekend in the Auburn Tigers. Sorry, Matlock. Auburn comes in with a 2-3 record, a heartbreaking loss there on a pick six to lose that game to Oklahoma last week. Georgia, I'm going to find out if you are a contender or pretender in the first half of this ball game against Auburn. If you don't come out and absolutely lay siege to the Auburn Tigers, we may have more questions than answers about the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs. And folks, let me give out our best bet of the week. And that is a game that I have liked all weekend long. I just kind of mentioned it in the rundown as far as our games to watch. And that is the Pitt Panthers as a 2.5-point favorite there on the road against UNC. UNC's defense has been absolutely horrible over the past couple of weeks, giving up 70 to James Madison 2 weeks ago. I like Pitt to not only win the game, but cover that 2.5 in this ball game. So with the winning ticket, we hope to see you at the window as the Pitt Panthers go down to Chapel Hill and get a big-time win over the North Carolina Tar Heels. On behalf of my amazing team here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, our lovely co-hosts, Jessica and Summer, for our senior handicapping analyst, Billy. This is Kenneth, senior analyst and founder of the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. Have a great rest of your weekend, and as always, God bless everyone.